Hey everyone, it's good to see you guys. I'm really excited to be here. I have a special guest on today. Her name is Jodi Aman. She's a licensed case social worker and she's the author of many books. I had her on about 3 weeks ago. And today we're going to get into conscious relationship. Jodi has a lot of experience with this in her practice, but also in her real life. So I really wanted to get an authoritative figure who has a lot of experience with this and bring it to the community. Jodi, thanks so much for taking the time to be here. I really appreciate you taking your time out to spend with us.
I'm glad to be here.
Where do you want to start the conversation? Where would you like to start in terms of talking about conscious relationship? This has been a fascinating topic for me over the last 6 months as I've been doing the Sacred Relationship series. And I kind of see everyone out there in the world doing a bunch of things, like running around, trying to do all this stuff. And the way that I've known it is that it's almost like they might not be in touch with the needs of their heart. And so they're trying to do all this stuff out in the world to get affection or attention. But really you can get that out of a conscious relationship. So maybe that's a great place for us to start. What do you think a conscious relationship gives another human being?
Well, if you think, let's look at relationships in general. And, we're not a self in a vacuum. We're only a self in relationships. So how you see yourself and how you experience yourself is how you are reflected back off the people around you. And if you're around toxic people, then you're going to really be giving your power away to try to get those people to say nice things about you or care. You do a lot of people pleasing or a lot of things that give your power away, like I said. And so if you're around people who lift you up and are not self-centered, people are self-centered to some extent, but I mean, some people are very self-centered. And those are those toxic people. They just think about themselves. They worry about themselves. People call them narcissists. And those are very difficult people to be around. They call it energy vampires. I mean, what the kind of people I'm talking about, and they're everywhere. So we have to learn how to deal with them. But if you surrounded yourself with people who lift you up, who support you, who love you, who see you, who are thoughtful, those relationships heal you because they reflect back the goodness that you are. Right? And so there's a healing aspect of those relationships when somebody's ego is not in the way. And I would say practically, if we thought about it practically, those would be conscious relationships where someone's ego is not the first thing you meet. That you meet their heart and they see your heart and they care and love you and they see you for who you are. And for people, it's like people who are transgender, or we want to be seen for who we are. That's what's so difficult before you come out, is that people don't see who you see. And so if you're around people who see you for who you know you are, or who you feel you are, those are conscious relationships. And they could be romantic. I mean, we'll probably talk mostly about romantic relationships, but they could be other relationships as well, of course.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think it's important to draw a distinction between giving your power away and then just also having your needs met as a social emotional creature. Sounds weird when I say it like that, but it's I think it's important to, like, for me, I mean, I need validation. I need to be recognized for my work and appreciated and acknowledged for that. But that's not like the crux of it. Like, that's not why that's not why I'm doing it. I think there's an important part of, I think there's an important middle space, I guess is what I'm saying, to where you can be giving your power away, but then at the same time recognizing, like, oh, I do need to be reminded of the best qualities of myself at times, because it's easy to forget or lose touch with that space within ourselves at times. At least for me it is, if I'm doing a lot out in the world. So can we talk more about having the value of having a partner who can reflect back to you those great aspects about yourself when you forget them in those moments where you are taking more action out there in the world?
Yes. So, the action we take stands on values that we have. We
Mhm.
engage in actions for a conscious purpose. And so if we're clear about our purpose and we take actions that are clearly informed by those purposes, then our partners and the people who love us see us, those are our identities, right? So
Mm,
our actions are not our identities, but the values that they stand on. What these actions say about what we give value to, what's important to us, what our purposes are, what our commitments are, that's our identity. And so when I'm talking about people seeing us for us, that's what we want to be seen for, is the values that we have. And so it sustains us, right? It lifts us up. Now we have burnout when we're doing all these activities or doing all these actions. They're all good for the world, but sometimes we have burnout just because it's exhausting, or we're doing a lot, or multitasking so much, and so our body needs a rest. But to have somebody else see us for who we are is uplifting, it's reinvigorating, it gives
mm,
us energy. So as
mm,
we're expending energy doing all the actions, it's incredibly important to have a support person to acknowledge, those values, those purposes, those commitments, the beautiful parts of you that you are. It
mm.
would really help sustain it. It actually decreases burnout when you have that kind of acknowledgement. And so you're seeing
Mm.
that in practical form. I'm just telling you, this is what's happening, and this is why it feels so good, and you need it.
Yeah, I love that. In tribal cultures, they actually call listening, like empathic, compassionate listening, or just holding presence and space for another person. They call it white magic. Like they actually call it white magic because it
I don't
raises
know
your.
which culture is that though, a specific one.
I mean, to be honest with you, I couldn't
Yeah.
remember. I
Okay.
mean,
Okay.
I read a paper on this probably about 5 or 6 years ago, as in when I was studying anthropology. But
Yeah.
they actually call it white magic because when you're listened to and you're held in safe space and really seen and
There,
acknowledged for who you are, uh, what
miracles happen.
happens? Yeah, like oxytocin gets released in the brain, dopamine goes up, the body relaxes itself, the heart rate reduces, the
Yeah,
blood
aging
vessels open.
stops, like we go backwards, right? There's healing done. And so if you think
Mm,
about overall, if in this really hyper general way, when we get put down or we get dissed or we get stuck, it's an aging, or it's a diminishing of us, right? Our sense of self, our worth. And so the opposite of that is any acknowledgement or any love, any uplifting, any sense that we are worthy or loved, right? So that's the opposite. So we're always, things fall in one of those two categories in our life. I mean, some
mm,
stuff's benign, but a lot of things fall in one of these two categories, taking us down a little bit and lifting us up. And we
mm,
could really consciously make choices to increase the up ones, right?
mm. Uh, In your book, you won Anxiety Zero. Can you tell me more about the connection between anxiety and? I don't think you talk about it in there too much because I haven't read through the whole thing, but there's a there's definitely a connection that I've seen just over the years within myself and coaching other individuals between this space of not having those support systems in place and anxiety. I mean, clearly um, there's a really big connection there. Can you tell us more about how anxiety, the connection between anxiety and relationship and support?
Sure. Anytime we feel bad, if we're feeling down or feeling anxious, we tend to, a knee-jerk reaction is to self-isolate, to pull
Mhm.
yourself away, because you don't want to be embarrassed because you have this, or you don't think that you're worthy enough to bother somebody, or you don't want to bother anybody. And so we pull back, and in that isolation we feel different, and we look at everybody, and anxiety is invisible. Everybody experiences it. We call it a lot of different things, but we all experiences it. But you think that everybody's okay but you, and there's this real like difference. You feel so disconnected, separate, and that separation is so hard on the soul. Like we feel so sad and rejected even in it. It's not true, but there's a deep sense of rejection in it, and so then you pull back more. right? And you don't want to
Mm,
take risks in relationships, you get nervous. So then you're more vulnerable, you know? I mean, we're social beings, and humans are social beings because that's how we survived. So when you
mm,
self-isolate and you're not belonging, right? We all want to belong. When you're not belonging, you feel so vulnerable because physiologically, our body and our soul is like, this is dangerous. So the anxiety goes up. So the more separate you feel in the world,
mm.
the more your anxiety rises and rises, the more vulnerable you feel. If you feel connected with do you ever get scared of doing something, so you ask a friend to come along with you? It's easier when you have someone with you. Like that
Definitely.
connection, like keeps us a little more robust, makes us a little more courageous, just makes us feel so not alone and not as vulnerable. And so I think that's the connection between having these up. And if you're around just toxic people, so you're around people, you're not isolated, but they're mean to you,
Mm,
that sometimes could be even worse.
mm.
Isolation's horrible, and being abused is horrible. So they're both really, really horrible.
Mm, what I've seen, at least in my own practices, sometimes when someone comes from a home where their support systems aren't there and they have fears or worries around speaking up for their needs, they just close off and then they go out, and then it kind of creates a cyclical effect of, okay, I can't share my needs. No one can actually see my needs. So I'm just going to isolate anyway and at least spend time with myself. But then it
And
gets
then they become needier. And
right.
then they're so like ashamed of how needy they are. And so they don't
Mm,
want to bother anybody and they become needier. Like it increases it. But if you actually
mm,
reach out to someone and get those needs met, it like dissipates. But
mhm,
what we do is the shame of it really attaches us. It really increases those things. And so, yeah, you know, we feel afraid to take risks in relationships, and then we feel more unloved and really need that connection more than we did before. And so that's the cycle that you're seeing is like, then it's, you know, more negative and more shameful, and you pull back even more, and it's more, you know, it's not good for the psyche to be alone.
mm. I was just speaking with someone this morning about this topic, and I could tell that they were a little bit in that type of spiral. Jody, would you say that once you start getting out of that emotional, I think it's, I mean, would it be fair enough to say that that's an emotional spiral?
Yeah, right. And I call it a negative spiral. You call it anything, you know. It's just this shame game. We just
Mm.
negative self judgments going over and over and over. It's like on a broken record in there.
How would you say that someone can get outside of that? I mean, I know the work with a therapist is huge. How would someone get outside of that, and how would they know when they're no longer in that spiral? Like, what are the
Well,
indicators?
that spiral feels really bad. It feels very out of control. You try to control it, so you're trying to figure it out, and it just makes you worse. You know, we like order. We don't like that chaos. And so our mind is like, oh, we have to figure this out so we can get order. And there's no answer to it because you're spiraling. And so you get worse and worse, and then you try to get more order and you get so what is happening, you know, what we really like to think about, what I like to think about, because I'm a practical teacher. Like I really love to give, that's why my YouTube channel is called Practical Miracles, because
Mm,
sometimes we really need to understand it, and then it's like, woo, and then it's like, you know, that healing, those miracles could happen because it's transformative. But
mm,
our brain, you know, 2 million years we evolved to be problem solvers because we had to survive like lots of things. You know, we had to figure out to get food and shelter and take care of everybody and multitask all the time. We have so much luxury right now, we don't have to do a lot of that. So our brain has a lot of space to do stuff.
mm, mm,
And so if we don't have like a project in our life or goals in our life or some kind of purpose and project and creativity, then our brain has so much space, and the negative comes in. You know, the negative
mm,
thoughts fill it because there's nothing else to do, and it's like we kind of create something to solve, but because we've created it is not solvable, and that's how we get people get their minds hooked on something, and it seems like something real. You know, it seems like, but I could get fired. You know, what if though? and there's like this element of like truth or possibility to it, but there's lots of possible things that you're not worried about. Your mind just gets hooked on this one, and that's how we know it's BS. But
Mm,
so I think that's what's really important for people, is to always have like goals, always have a project, and that doesn't have to be stressful. It could be fun. You know, creativity is problem solving because you're using your prefrontal cortex, you're developing it. That's going to decrease your anxiety, it's going to decrease your negative thinking. And if you really develop that prefrontal cortex, because like if I was going to make a wooden box, I'd have to, you know, design it and be like, oh, well, am I going to put the hinges on? Am I going to do exterior hinges? Do I do interior hinges? I'm making decisions, right? It's like, it's not like a real problem, but I'm using the same function of the brain to problem solve, and it gives my brain something to do. And
mm,
positive, and it builds confidence up. You know, sometimes you could give that away, so it could make relationships. You could do a project with other people, run a fundraiser, organize a fundraiser. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do that actually has a lot of meaning and connections. So those are the kind of things, when people do that stuff and engage in life in that way, they thrive. They emotionally
mm,
thrive.
yeah. I think it's so important to recognize and acknowledge how vital service to the world is for our own
Mhm.
happiness. Like we're wired that way. Uh,
Yes.
the first thing that I tell to someone, unless they're a workaholic, of course, the first thing that I say to a person is, if they're down or depressed, is like, what can you get up about? You know, and like that's just anyone who comes like to just happens to cross my path or something like that. Unless I can see that they're a workaholic, then I won't say that. But
Yeah.
for that case, they might just need to actually rest. But it really is vital, like serving humanity in some way, working towards something. It's so vital to.
Learning something new. I mean, we just
Mm,
need that, charges us up.
mm,
It
mm,
keeps us young, it keeps us interested and engaged. And a lot of times you see people, you know, people come to me and maybe they're in different stages in life than when they come to you. I mean, I've had people come, but sometimes they're in really tight spots and they're really stuck. And that isolation, like because when people are so isolated, there's the dopamine stops hitting, so they're not
mm,
interested in anything. So you're trying to get them a project and they're like, nothing really interests me. It's like, you got to do it before you're interested, because we know why you're not interested, because you've been so isolated. And that's why it's so difficult right now with the corona quarantine. People are stuck a little bit, and they're not, like, things are less and less interesting. Not everybody, some people have been really creative and they're doing wonderful now because they're figuring things out and doing things, they're using that brain, they're feeling good about themselves because of that. And then some people are stuck. And
mhm.
sometimes it's like teenagers, because they don't have their routine and that kind of thing, and they're stuck. So they need that sense of purpose, and so they're a bit lost at this time, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I want to steer the conversation back towards a conscious relationship. I got off track there for a little bit, but how do you think a conscious relationship can keep you in a space where you're not allowing room for the mind to come in to create stories and get you in that self-isolation space? Can you speak
Well,
more?
yeah, so when you have somebody that you have that intimacy with, you know, in a conscious relationship, you have that intimacy, like they know you, they're a witness to your life, right? There's a witness to your life. So there's somebody, so you're not untethered. When we don't have a witness to our life, it's, you know, in the company, they say, if it's not documented, it never happened.
Hmm.
That saying, you know,
Hmm.
it's a, if it's not witnessed, it's like you don't happen. That's why you're only a self in these relationships, right? So you have
Mm,
this witness for your life, and so there's this intimacy about having a witness, someone seeing the goods, the bads, the messes, and still seeing you or laughing about those messes. And then, you know, I did forget the question though,
oh
that
yeah,
was
yeah.
going
No,
on,
that's
but
okay.
I was gonna, it made sense. It will
Yeah,
make sense.
yeah. It was just that. How does a conscious relationship and that connection that you have with another human being keep you from falling in or slipping into that self-isolation.
Okay. I know where I was going.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it gets us out of our head. When you have that intimacy and that witness, then you have someone, you don't have to like catch them up. Now, if you haven't seen a friend for a couple months and then you've seen them again, they have to kind of be caught up. When
Mhm.
you have that daily witness in the relationship, someone who knows what's going on day to day, there's not that catch up time. Right? So
Mm.
there's more chance that you would share things that you might not share with someone. You don't talk about that often. And in our head, things are so much more difficult, and that negative spiral could happen. When we take it out of our head, someone's like, oh, that happens to me too, or yeah, I totally get it, or it just dissipates the energy of it when you take it out and share it with somebody. So in these
Mhm.
conscious relationships, just having somebody, and sometimes you focus on the other person, so you get out of your head because you're focusing on them. You're doing a
Mhm.
project together, doing something together, having fun together. That companionship just takes you out of it. Physical touch, takes
Mhm.
us into our body instead of our head.
Mm.
Sensuality, sexuality takes us into our body and out of our head. So there's tons of ways these conscious relationships could really help us get out of our head. And I love this pillow talk time. Couples, all kinds of couples have this time before they go to bed to talk about their day. And there's a time where you discuss like what you did and if that was okay with you, or if you want to do something different the next time. It like keeps us ethical and
Mm.
moral, to
Mm.
have each other at that time as that witness to our life and really having that reflecting surface so you could be really deciding, am I doing the things I want to do consciously in my life?
Mm.
And
Mm.
it keeps us focused on our goals, what we hope for, what we want, and out of that negative hook on something that just keeps us stuck or going backwards or whatever the heck it does.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like it creates a safe space to come back to remind you yourself of really what you're about and who you are.
Yes.
I, I mean, I've lived in times of my life where I didn't really do much and I was down. I was like, okay, I need to do more stuff. And then I did too much stuff. And then I lost myself in the doing and was like, oh, I don't have. So I really think it sounds like it's having a safe space to come back to remind yourself of who you are, what you're about, why you're doing what you're doing, and just kind of keeping you honest about maybe your bullshit.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. What?
Yeah, people in conscious relationships, people who are in super conscious relationships, they're kinder because they're not as scared. So they
Mhm.
don't have to get power over other people, you know what I mean? Or they don't get lost in their own anxiety. They're kinder. They serve the world better. And I always like to, did I say this to you the last time we were on together? But like infatuation is like a couple looking at each other. And then
Mm.
people in love, like conscious love, they're looking out into the world like as a one and looking out and doing their service into the world.
Yeah, you mentioned that. We talked about that a little bit, but I mean, I'd love to take it a little bit deeper. Can you
Sure.
tell me more about the difference between looking inward with each other and oh, look at that, like I love them, and instead, and then both facing out towards. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so I think it's really about the ego, right? So when you're like infatuated with someone, people could get addicted to the drama of like arguing and getting back together and arguing. You've probably seen some of those
Oh
kind of
yeah.
situations. You could get out of it. So if you're in one of those, that's okay. So people get addicted to the drama. I've been there too. Um, and there's again, like a self-centeredness, even around the coupledom, right? There's a self-centeredness. And so they're not available for the rest of the world because a lot of energy is going into that.
Mm.
And so if people are in this conscious love, like it seems like there's not the ego there because they're not so worried about themselves. They're getting their needs met because they're they're all both conscious enough to be thoughtful and caring to the other person, see the other person, love the other person, lift the other person up. So you don't need to be like, give me more, because that makes
Mhm.
us get into our ego because we're pretty needy. And so when you have this conscious love, there's security as well. And so then both of you, yeah, it doesn't mean you're not spending time together and not having that quality intimacy. You absolutely are. But you could both have the energy to be in service in the world,
Mm.
to be in service to your family, you know, your older, the generation above you, the generation below you, um,
Mm,
colleagues, friends, your business, you know, there's so many other things, or to the earth, to movements, to things that are important for us to put our energy towards.
mm, mm. How does how do you think someone gets to the point where they're ready for that? Because I mean, I've certainly been in relationships where I just there was times where I wasn't ready for it, and I can look back and see that, and there was times where other people weren't ready for it, and I was ready for it. Can you talk more just about the indicators of whether someone knows that they're ready for that type of relationship or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to kind of do some fear inventory. You know, fear is the thing that gets in our way more than anything else. That's why I wrote my books on anxiety. You know, it's really about the fear that stops us. You know, underneath all the problems that I talk to anybody with, if we unpack those and get underneath it, it's all fear under there, all of it. That's like the source of all of our problems. And it's like fear and guilt. But if you really think about it, fear and guilt at that very basic level are the same thing, like the fear of being unworthy. And
Mm,
so if a person still has some work to do on themselves, like on that, and you could heal in the relationship, but if somebody has that in between the relationship, right?
mm,
Sometimes people are open, they've had difficult past, they've past experiences, and so they're really open. They go in this relationship, and it's a conscious relationship, and they're healed. They're healing together. That's okay. But sometimes you put that in between the relationship. I mean, this is just a metaphor, but it seems like it seems like what I'm trying to say. You know, it's like between it, and it is like
mm,
blocks that intimacy and connection, and it's first,
mm.
like the insecurity has to be is the is taking the power.
Right,
um
right.
that's when there's a problem, you know, because if someone's really insecure, the other person could really feel accused a lot of the time. You know, it's like they're saying, well, why did you talk to that person? And it feels like an accusation, especially if it's happened a lot of times. And so that person
Mm,
gets really defensive, and then you know what happens from there. I mean, it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you have so much insecurity about a relationship, you really could push the other person away.
right. Oh yeah. I mean, that's happened to me. I've been pushed. No, I've been the one. I ran. I had the anxious attachment style. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh no. I ran instead
Yeah,
of giving safe space. But
yeah, it's like that's like that person giving that power away. I mean, you're giving power to the insecurity, not necessarily to the other person, but you're just giving. It's just like Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz. You know, she had her ruby slippers that she had all the power. She had all her personal agency. And it's like walking into a party and like giving anxiety
mm,
your shoes, or giving insecurity your shoes instead of keeping them on your feet. And you know, when people like want you're feeling insecure. Everyone feels insecure. Everybody does. So it's not like oh my gosh, if I'm insecure, I can't have success. That's not true at all. But if you're insecure and you're like, I really want some reassurance, what you would do is you'd give reassurance, like you'd give a little tenderness. If the person is not tender or they're toxic, obviously get out of there. But if
right.
it's a good person and it's a good match and it's a conscious relationship, if you're feeling a little insecure and you just want a little TLC, then give some TLC. If it's the right person, they'll give that TLC right back, and there's no conflict, right? It's
Hmm.
win-win. And so
Hmm.
that's how you do it. And if someone won't meet you there, they're not the right person. Like they are too much in their ego or whatever, you know?
Right, right. I think that's a question of capacity and capability. Does this person have the capacity or capability to show up in the way that I'm willing to show up? In
Yeah, and some people like, you know, obviously there's a love languages. So some people like more affection than other people, so that might just be about preference, but in the whole, some of that stuff you could work out, but if the person cannot is just not emotionally available for you and you have insecurity, that's not going to really you
yeah.
get when people feel bad for their insecurity when that happens, because they get the other person's so defensive, and then you just feel like gaslight you, and then you
Mm,
feel really bad about it all. But really what's going on is that that it's just not a good match.
Right. Jodi, how would you say that someone communicates that if they have like like for me, I know like my triggers, like I get really upset with technology when it doesn't work. Like because it's just I have marketing, I have YouTube, it just gets me so upset. It's like why would technology gives me so much love in the sense that it helps me reach so many people, but at the same time, it seems like there's these moments where it fails, and it's like, like I get really triggered with technology. Like it's not a pretty sight, and so I tell whenever I'm in a relationship, I let them know, like, look, you're going to see a whole new me come out if my laptop goes down, or if like right now my emails are not going out, and so I'm having to use my email from like middle school. Like it's so how would you I guess what's a good way if you know your triggers, your own maybe messiness, or when those just being human comes out, if you know those things when they come out of you, how can you create safe space for yourself to allow those parts to be seen? Does that make sense?
Well, I like how you did it. There was a bit of a sense of humor about it. There's a bit of it, not taking yourself so seriously, and a bit of a joke, and saying that, and it's almost like it takes the pressure off, because a lot of times when we're crabby, we have so much negative self-judgment about being crabby that our crabbiness increases like tenfold sometimes. Like the original crabby is not as bad as the crabby with the shame about it. Right. So we're horrible to the people around us because and so if we just kind of accepted our crabby, there's a lighterness. It's like lighter, weight wise. So you just lighter. And so you say, don't be around me if my things don't work, because this is my business. But there's like you were almost laughing as you said that. And I could picture you saying that to somebody. And then if you're in a real situation like that, they're not afraid, so they don't have their shackles up, right? If you're in a situation for real, you already did that and you were kind of laughing, and you're in a real situation where everything crashed and your partner was there, they wouldn't get terrified, right? Because they wouldn't be like, because there's a lightness, you're aware of it, you're open about it, which is going to allow you to feel it. And it's not going to be like that 10 times what it could be if you had shame about it and doubled down and got defensive, and then it could be conflict. And so I think that's important, is not to judge it. Be like, yeah, who wouldn't be upset if their business went down like that? Like, who wouldn't be? You work so hard. I know I'm online too. And so I know how much it takes to do all of this software. And it's like I know how much work it is. So I get it. And so it's incredibly frustrating. And the button doesn't push. So, but if you allow yourself, of course, that's upsetting. If you allow yourself to feel it, it really dissipates a lot faster. If you judge yourself, first of all, you attach to it. Second of all, you get 10 times more upset.
Yeah. I think I love that. I think creating safe space for yourself, or being open with your partner about the triggers and letting them know ahead of time, and maybe them even giving you a funny self-reflection back in that moment. Like that's I found that to be the most useful thing. If like someone's triggered, or someone I'm close to is triggered, whether it's my family member or a friend or something like that, I'll let them know, hey, I'm gonna make a funny face or get stupid every time, like, and still show that care, but at the same time, like, ask them permission when they're not in the trigger. Hey, are you okay if every time you get really crazy and have that moment of insecurity, are you okay if I do something funny to lighten it, and still have safe space if you need to just vent? And I found that to be pretty effective. That's been something that I've been playing with the last 6 months. And I think it's only happened once.
That's great. I mean, when you plan ahead like that, what are you going to do in these situations? It's incredibly effective to be able to do that. And also, I was thinking, in my house, when someone's upset, everyone else gets more compassionate, because you can't. If you're upset and someone's compassionate, you can't stay upset.
Right.
It's just,
It's
it
impossible.
feels so good. Yeah, if someone gives you TLC and it's like, "I'll help you," what, even sometimes my husband just he knows he can't help, but if I'm like frustrated about software,
Yeah.
sometimes he just sits next to me and like, and looks at the computer. And he knows that I'll just feel supported in that moment. He just like
Yeah.
looks at the computer. He knows he doesn't know anything about this software. And he might put his hand on my knee or something, and I'm trying to figure it out, getting frustrated, and he's just like there. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
That's great. That's wonderful. I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, just knowing, I think in those moments where you feel really alone, and you just get upset, I think just knowing that you're not alone is really valuable.
Yeah. Just saying like, oh, that stinks. If
Yeah.
he just says that, it's like so great. I can't stay upset. Oh, that, I'm not talking about him. It's like something's going on, and I say, "Oh, this is not working," and he'll be like, "Oh, it isn't." Like, "Oh, it's too bad." It's like, phew, just
Yeah.
calm right down. And
Yeah.
if our partners do, but if people have, like, if you have a history of anger in your family, and that scares you, and I got like, "Oh, this doesn't work," if I said something like that and I used a high pitched voice, for some people that could be really scary. So
Right.
that's something that has to be negotiated in the relationship, ahead of time, to understand, like, that really scares me. I can't, you can't do that. And that person would have to respond differently. I don't have to do that because I know I can do that. I could release that,
Mm,
and then he'd
mm.
sit next to me and I'm like fine within 2 minutes, and he doesn't get afraid. But some people, if you've been abused or you've been and it had families like that, that would be too scary. And so we would have had to renegotiate how we handle those kind of situations. If I would have had to ask for what I needed in a different way. Um,
Mm, mm. Yeah, I love that. I wish we made movies like that. Where it was like, I mean, because you see movie and like my mind as you were saying that was going to the place of like, well, why isn't that normal that we conduct relationships that way? Like going into a relationship consciously and thinking like, let's write down all the situations where we get mad or upset, or let's write down all the situations where a potential,
I
act.
think that'd be perfect. I think it's a great thing to do. One time I took this workshop, it was a year-long training program. And when we were entered in, they asked us like, what do we want out of the program? Individual interviews. And then they said, how do you handle conflict? How do you like to handle conflict?
Hmm.
How brilliant and wonderful is that? So they knew, for if something came up, I mean, this was a group of 30 people, something's going to come up, right? And so
Hmm.
they knew if something came up, would you want to handle it publicly? Would you want us to pull you aside? Like, how would you like us to address it if something happened? And this is the most brilliant thing I've ever heard. And I've always done this in my classes since then. But you could do it in any relationship. In,
Yeah,
in, in fact, when I work with couples, we talk about negotiating a rate, we negotiate all of that. Like, how are we going to, and if you negotiate it ahead, the conflict just goes down, down, down.
I love that. Yeah, that's like I always, whenever I do business consulting, I always say manage expectations up front. Like that's the best thing that you can do. What are you expecting? What are you hoping for? What are you not hoping for? And really opening up space for those expectations and because that's all I think conflict or anger really is we have an expectation whether we're conscious of it or not, and it's not being met in that moment. And so then
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good other context for that. Like, managers should ask everybody who comes to work for them, how do you handle conflict? How do you like to handle conflict?
yeah, I love that
That
question.
would change everything, right?
Yeah, the world would definitely be a much more peaceful place. I'm looking at I got to lean back because I'm fading into existence
Oh,
here.
yeah, right.
um, um, I just want to make guys, we're going to go to questions here. I'm seeing some questions come up. We're going to go to questions here pretty soon. I want to ask one or two more questions and then we'll take questions out. Does that work for you, Jody?
Yeah, that works great.
Beautiful. So I guess I really want to point to a new direction here in the sense of when a person has a conscious relationship in their life, how do you think that changes the way that they show up in the world when they have that safe space, or at least they're creating that safe space with another person? How does that show? How does that?
Well, they show up clear and conscious, right? They show up cohesive, right? They're not like, dismantled or in chaos, right? They're in cohesiveness because they don't, we're only as good as our closest relationships. So if you have relationships that are toxic, you show up in the world like, like your energy is not cohesive, not clear. It's like full of gunk, right? And it's not your fault. It's not a blame or anything like that. I'm acknowledging that doesn't feel good. And I know that doesn't feel good. And so, but if you have your closest relation, doesn't always have to be romantic. You could have other relationships that are conscious that fill that up. And daily, it's like a daily witness to your life. So if you live alone and you're not dating for now or in the moment, even if you want to, have somebody that is like it's daily, almost daily, caught up on your life, so you have that witness, you have that conscious relationship, because then you clear your stuff. My formula to happiness is you have to get rid of the things that make you suffer and then bring in the things that bring you joy and practice every day. And so we need to be constantly clearing our stuff, but when it's bombarded on us all the time by a toxic relationship, it's really hard to get rid of it, especially if you're in the context of that.
Right. Is that just processing, like just having someone who can process with you?
Yes. So having someone to get you out of your head, to get you out of that stuckness or that spiral down, someone to see you. It's so healing to someone to acknowledge, to see you. Physical touch is so healing on the nervous system, just really calms the whole nervous system down. We're the only primate that doesn't use social grooming in a
Wow.
human. And so that it's for the nervous system. Yeah, it's to get bugs off you, but it really calms the nervous system. And after there's a scare with any primate, they all do social grooming on each other and regulate themselves. And so when you have those relationships, when you have the touch, when you have someone acknowledging you, when you have someone listening and someone witnessing, there's a cohesion in ourselves. Like we're able to be more grounded and feel more connected. We're not isolated. And so there's our we have more robust mental health, spiritual health, physical health, definitely. So it's really important.
Yeah. There was of course, this is the second quote from my anthropology experiences, so I'm not going to be able to say which tribe or which area it came from. I just remember reading it. I know the part of the intellectual part of you is probably cringing at the fact that
Well,
I
I
can't.
just like where you're going to appropriate and say tribal cultures all over the world. It's like hard to like right now. Like we really have to be careful how we talk, right?
Right. No, I could see. I
We
could
have to
see that
acknowledge
look
the
in your
culture it
face when I
came
said,
from, right? I know. I'm
yeah.
like,
I was like,
do I
oh,
say something?
yeah. No, I
Yeah.
could see that. So I can't remember who it was, but I just know that there was one culture that I was reading about, and this was years ago when I was doing some anthropology work. They actually, like, when someone's hurting or grieving, like the entire village comes out and supports them, and it's just so amazing to see our modern culture and just the lack of needs that are being met at those really primal social emotional levels that we're really missing. And so I think the work that you're doing in the world is incredibly important and powerful, more so than ever, because I mean, the great things about technology is you can create an identity and start over anew. The bad things about it is and we can connect with anyone around the world. But the bad things about it, I think, is it can also disconnect us from our immediate community as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Listening is so powerful. Just being heard and listened to. I think we don't do that much, and that's why people stay stuck. I went
Mm,
on a retreat and we did all these activities in pairs, but one of us had to be, instead of giving advice, we just held space. And so people are able to listen in a way they never usually do, because you're always constantly thinking about what advice you're going to give and how that happened to me. I want to tell you about it, you know. And the healing that happened on that retreat was so profound. And I know it was because of the work I do. I know that's what it was, is that people were heard in a way they are never heard, because we don't listen to each other. We're just constantly thinking of the next thing we're going to say back, or how we relate to it, you know? And so it could be, it was so, people had this trauma. People had trauma for like 20, 30 years. Some women were older. They had trauma for decades, and it was healed in a moment when they were, it's so simple. And I just really came back from that being like, wow, we could do a lot better. And it's not even doesn't even have to be that hard.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, one of my favorite things that I remember I got in one of the coaching schools that I did, I've done so many, but they were talking about when to point, when to tell, when to accept and absorb, and when to, there was one more distinction, I can't remember it, but I think that's so valuable. It's like sometimes we just need to hold space and listen. Other times we do need to tell and encourage, and other times we need to just point at what the person's mind is really trying to figure out and what they're actually trying to process, and not even tell them, just, hey, do you see that you're being shown to do this right now? And then give them the reins. And I think that's such a valuable, a really valuable skill. It's these deep, soft skills that I think our society needs to give more attention to, for sure, instead of just technology, STEM.
Right.
Beautiful. Jodi, we're going to go to some questions. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, great.
Cool. I'm going to bring up Stacy here first. Hey, Stacy. Stacy says, hey, Jodi, what advice do you have for those new and holding space in their conscious relationship for growth versus allowing yourselves to stay in something that's just not aligned?
I think, Stacy, I would connect with your intuition about that, because sometimes, so sometimes you could give someone more chances, right? You could grow together, and sometimes that person is not aligned, and there will be signs if you open to listening. And so, and it maybe would take a week or two, you know, it might take some time, because you might need a little more experience to really make sure those signs are what you're reading correctly. But I think we could really look at our intuition here to try to say, is this something we have to just grow together? Do I really see a future with this person? Or is it, I know in my heart and I'm just trying to make it work? Right? You probably know that distinction. And if you want some practices of, you know, using your intuition, do things like spend time in nature. Because if you walk in the woods, you really get centered in yourself and really feel into your body. And then you can kind of ask your body those questions. Is this for me? Should I keep going? And sometimes it's like, give it a couple more weeks. Maybe that's the answer. It's not a yes, this is perfect, keep going. It's like, give it a couple more weeks. It's unclear yet. And sometimes it's a no, like you feel it in your body, no, or you feel it in your body, like, there's hope here. So, and every day you could say yes, or you could say no to it. So you don't have to make a decision for the rest of your life right now. You make a decision for today. If it's no, then I guess that's probably the rest, you know, that relationship's over. But if it's yes for today. I'm going to give it some more time. And if something's going to not be aligned, it'll show up again and you'll know.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. I think checking in twice, like if it keeps showing up and you're still getting those same signs, then it's like, yep, okay, I know what
And ask your friends see, you know, because they have a distance to be able to see, and they'll tell you. Friends who love you and know you, the ones you trust, not friends who are like, you know, nervous and scared for you and that kind of thing. That clouds our view a little bit, but your friends could see some, you know, it's a good calibration.
Beautiful. Yeah, she says, waving back and thank you for future advice.
No problem. You're welcome.
I'm going to go to Jennifer's question here, or I'll just bring up, she's got a couple things here. She says, men are trying to help women, but they need to help their own inner child and vice versa. Many men don't even see a priestess in front of him when she shows up, or he self-destructs by pushing her away or running away. What would you say to that comment, Jodi?
Can you go back to the first one?
Yeah.
Okay, go back to the first one. Okay, so
Men are trying.
yeah, this is a overgeneralized thing about men is they like to fix problems, right? They want to fix it, and so women just want to be listened to, and so men are trying to fix it, but but she's also suggesting here that they need to work on their own inner child. Maybe because that gives them worth, like to fix the problem, it makes them feel worthy. I think maybe that's what she's suggesting. So women are trying, they're trying to help women to prove that they're worthy of themselves. And so to get really centered in their own worth might be worthy of their time, to really get centered and build their self-confidence up so that they could be present with women and they don't have to fix it. It's not about that. It's not that ego. Sometimes when you're trying to help people fix it, it is your ego there. Not always. Sometimes there's good intentions that you do help people. And sometimes I think this was what Jennifer's suggesting. It is about the ego, and a woman feels that. It's in the way.
Right.
Okay, go to their second one and make sure I answer.
Yeah, I love that. And she says many men don't see a priestess in front of them when she Yeah.
I think that's probably because, right, it's, they again, same reason, right? You want to be helpful. And so you see somebody who, the damsel in distress archetype, and that makes you feel like you're doing something, or you're worthy, or you care. And so, maybe that's true. Or maybe they'd be intimidated if they did, But yeah, everyone's kind of dealing with their own inner child and their own ego. It's not like you get rid of the ego altogether. It's just like if it gets in the middle of things or in front of you, that's a problem.
Right. And it sounded like that's exactly what she was experiencing. I was getting the sense that she had this connection with another man, but the connection was, he was like, oh, here's a chance where I can look like I'm the hero and save the day and help her. And it's like, well, it's not actually about her. It's about you.
Yeah, I think that's what I heard too. I think I answered that okay. Yeah, and she's like this empowered woman who's like, I'm a priestess.
Yeah.
I help, I could help you actually.
Right. Where's the man to connect? Yeah, I see that. That's good. Well, Jodi, thank you so much for taking the time out and to be here. We always appreciate your presence and your energy. Can you tell everyone in the community what you're doing, anything where people can find you? I know you got a couple books that we introduced last time.
Right. Yeah. So my name's Jodi Aamann. As you see, I have a YouTube channel, Jodi Aamann Practical Miracles. My website's just at Jodi Aamann. And I have a new book coming out for teenagers, but really all ages could read it. It's really written for teenagers and the 20-year-olds. And you could get it for your kids, or you could get it for you. And I don't know. I'm really excited about this book and the things I have to share. I have tons of online programs. You need something, I got it for you.
Beautiful. And guys, if you want to check that out, just check out the links in the description box. And you'll get over there, and I'm sure you'll find something that you like. Jodi, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, Jared. So glad to be here.
Beautiful. That's all we got for now, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. If you look at the schedule, we got some new stuff coming up. We have next week we have the Awakening series starting, so be looking out for that. I'll be bringing on some new individuals, some different coaches and healers in this space. So if you want to be a part of that, feel free to be looking out for the new info that I'll be sharing. Other than that, I wish you all a safe and lovely weekend, and I will talk to everyone soon. Bye for now.